Welcome back to TMI with Teryl and Martha. After all of the really difficult things that have happened recently with the death of Charlie Kirk and all of the things that brought about, we thought it'd be a great time to talk about faith beyond religion and how we deal with our own lives and our faith and our health. So we wanted to talk about that today.
Yes, because, to me and Martha, it's important. There is a lot of research that shows that faith and a belief system in something maybe higher than oneself is proven to help one's health and wellness and support health in the body. So we felt like it was like a very good time for us to talk about our faith, how we got to where we are, and just the spiritual practices that we participate in that help us to ground ourselves and to kind of rise above the madness, so to speak.
Well, and it seems too that obviously we've had a lot of tragedies in the last few months. And it seems like they happen more often. Now, I have a theory that it's because we live in this 24-hour news cycle where there's cameras everywhere that I'm not saying there aren't more things going on, but we're more aware of them. In prior to the social media world, if it happened near you, you might know about it, but you didn't know about it if you lived across the country or around the world.
Right.
Now, pretty much anything that happens, you hear about it immediately, and you kind of feel like it's happening to you. And so we wanted to think about it from that standpoint. And, there's all this talk after these tragedies happen, whether it was the shooting of the Catholic school or the shooting of the Democratic Speaker of the House in Minnesota because she voted with Republicans, or it was the shooting of Charlie Kirk. There's this knee-jerk reaction of, I don't want to hear about thoughts and prayers. I don't want to hear about that. But the fact of the matter is that for me,
Right.
faith does not mean nothing bad ever happens to me.
Right.
Faith means that I have a mechanism, and for me, that's prayer, where I can deal with the ups and downs of life
Right.
in a more holistic and a healthier way because I have that connection, in my case, with Jesus Christ.
Right. And Martha and I know that we're talking to quite a wide audience. So, really what our thoughts and feelings are can parlay to any deep belief system, as long as it's rooted, to me, in love and in kindness, right? Which most, if I've spent a lot of time reading a lot of different religious texts and sayings and books. And, funny enough, at the end of the day, God is available to us all in any one of those formats. But there's specific modalities and things that we do, that Martha does, or that I do, that allow us to keep our faith strong even when things are turbulent, that allow us to ground ourselves. So our goal in this conversation, I think, is to help everyone understand that it's really not judging who you love or what you do or who you worship, if you worship, or who you pray to. It's about understanding that is a very valuable and very important part of you staying well. And so Martha and I are just going to kind of share our thoughts as girlfriends on what we do. And
so I was always a very questioning child, okay? And I got myself in a lot of trouble. I mean, I was raised in the church. I was raised in an Orthodox Lutheran church, a very high, what we called a high Lutheran church. Right. It was almost like a Catholic church. And I did all the things. I went to confirmation, and I was baptized, and I was confirmed, and all the things. I was president of the Luther League. I was very involved in church. And then when I was about 29, I was in a very difficult place in my life. Right. And I had this moment where it only could have been in my mind, it was Jesus reaching out to me and telling me everything was going to be okay. And from that point on, I have considered myself a born again Christian. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I think I asked this question in 4th grade and got a lot of trouble for it. I said, because the big question I would ask God one day is, why do we not know anything about Jesus between 12 and 30? Because that's when you have adolescent problems and all the kinds
hormones,
of things and all of those things. We don't know much about him during that period of time. Right. And I asked the question, how do we know that Buddha or the Hindu religion is not the way God spoke to those people in a way that they
Through
could
there.
understand it.
Right, right.
You know, and I got in a lot of trouble for that, but I don't regret asking the question. And I've always asked those kind of questions because I want to know. And I think God wants us to ask
I
questions.
think he does, Martha. And I think it's important to not assume we know it all. Spirit is very vague to us as a nation. I was asking questions the same. That's where you and I are very kindred souls that way. We love to talk and we love to ask questions and we love to seek answers, right? And that has been, I think, one of the key pieces that have drawn us together.
Yes.
But I feel like as a child, I too made a lot of Baptist ministers really angry. Yes, I asked questions that one should not ask because it's not fun when they're put in a position they can't give you an answer. And quite honestly, I think the best answer is always, let me look into that. Or, you know what? Great question. I'm going to think about that and let's see if we can find something close to an answer.
And it's funny that you said that because if you look at a lot of the clips of Charlie Kirk, one of the things that he often did was when someone would ask a question, even if it was an out there question, he would say, "Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it." If people would kind of heckle the person, he'd say, "No, no, no, let them speak. Let's talk about it." And I think that's what we have to do. That's what we have to get back to. But
Agreed.
my husband is a 10-year cancer survivor, and he was always a prayerful person. He grew up in a Baptist situation, so he did believe in the wrath of God. Okay. And anytime we went to church, the first thing he did when the sermon would start, because he has a short attention span and he's detail oriented. And so if he got bored in the sermon, sorry, pastors, he would pull out the Bible and start reading it. And he always read the book of Revelation.
Wow.
And he flipped right to it because
That's the big parts.
I said, you can't be afraid of that. And what you have to do is you have to kind of mesh Exodus with the Revelation because they go together
Right.
because of all of that, the mirrored images and that sort of thing. But since he's had cancer, we pray twice a day together. Yeah. And just recently we were praying, and we were talking about this very concept that prayer does not mean nothing bad ever happens to you.
Yes, that
Prayer
is true.
gives you the strength to be able to get through what happens to you, because there's no guarantees. We have free will. The only guarantee from in my religious construct that where I've accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior, what's promised to me is an eternal life. It's not promised to me how I get to that eternal life. Do you know?
You're not guaranteed a non-bumpy road, the yellow brick road.
That's right.
You're not. What is Dorothy?
Yes. No,
I'm
not. And it's not a straight path,
No.
So what I love though is speaking to people of other faiths. Okay.
Right.
And after 9/11, a number of times we had the imam from the local Islamic center on.
Oh, nice.
And his name was Bilal, and he was a wonderful person who had been raised in the Christian tradition without a father, and that the Islamic tradition gave him structure. And he was a great husband and father to his 5 children. And so I respect that, even though I may not understand it.
Right.
I may not see it as my faith structure, but I understand it. And we could talk openly to each other about our faith.
Beautiful.
And that's what we did.
That is beautiful.
And so I always love opportunities. My kids will say, "Are you going to strike up conversations with strangers?" Well, yeah, probably. Because that's how you learn a lot.
That's what I do all the time. I'm like, the word. I mean, I'll talk to somebody in any given point if they want to engage with me, and I love to hear different belief systems and different viewpoints, and hence the wisdom codes with Greg Braden. The wisdom codes, that book takes really powerful, creative messages from all the different religions, including the Bible, and putting them there for you to use for meditation purposes. And this one book I read called Just Breathe, and it was written by a young man that I actually met who the book is Christopher James, Just Breathe. And I met him. He was delivering my furniture to my house. And somehow or another, These are what I call God winks. And this is, I see God, and I see even Jesus in the works and the smiles of many different human beings. And this young man ended up, loving my property. And I said, yes, we write children's books. And he said, I wrote a book. And he went to his truck and he handed me his book. And it was basically his path to the Lord and how he changed his life while he was incarcerated. So this young man was incarcerated, and he wrote the story about how breath work and meditation turned his life around. And one of the things he said in that story was, um, prayer is when you talk to God. Meditation is when you listen.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
It just gives me goosebumps.
Well, and I think too on this path that everyone's on. Now, look, I have a certain point of view. I believe that the way to salvation is through Jesus Christ.
Right.
But I also, we get bogged down in like how long we've been at church and whether we've been at church our whole life. And the fact of the matter is God doesn't care if you come to him on the first day or the last day.
Right.
And I believe all these different paths lead to the same place. Okay.
I am
I
with
believe
you
that,
100% on that.
Yes.
And let me tell you, I am no stranger. I was baptized I think I was 15 when I was baptized. I went to White Oak Baptist Church in Greenville, South Carolina. I went to all the fun trips with the youth groups, and I was raised in that environment. There was always something that just didn't feel right, though, and that's why I would anger people sometimes, because I'd always ask questions. And then, but the point of that is that I got to where I would find the words of Jesus in the Bible. I just wanted to get to know him as a master, as a human who had come to this earth to save us, right? And so the more I read his words, the more I felt differently about what was being said sometimes through the words of others regarding the Lord, right? He was so kind. And yes, he threw went into the money changers and tossed some tables. Love doesn't always look cushy, and sweet. I mean, sometimes you have to do things, but the actual words of Jesus as that were related to me through the Bible, which is what I was reading, I got to know this incredible being who was here to do great things and wanted us, these things that I do, you can do also, and greater things shall ye do. He wanted us to learn to use the principles in life, to be able to emulate a lot of the ways he was living. And so I moved to New Jersey in the middle of 8th grade, in the middle of being in the middle of a Baptist lifestyle. And guess what I was surrounded by at that point?
Tell me.
A lot of Jewish people, wonderful Jewish people, completely different belief systems. So this is when I got involved with like head to head loving and seeing people who thought completely different from anything I was ever told. So I went to, spend the night with a girlfriend. You go to church with her family. That's just kind of how that goes. So I'd go to church on a Saturday, and it would be a synagogue. And I would get goosebumps. They were worshiping really great people that had different viewpoints than I did.
But not really that different.
No,
when you
no.
think about it. And the thing about Jesus and his anger, okay?
Right.
He got angry at people who should know better.
Right.
The people like the Pharisees and the people like that, the people that hadn't been introduced, whether it was the woman at the well, whether it was children, other
Right.
people, that's where you saw that love shine through, because he figured there are certain people that should know better. You know what I mean? And he's going to get mad at them.
Yeah, well, and I always loved how he would trick them, and, he would say, like, when they asked him about the money,
Yeah.
he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Like, he had
And unto
no
God,
interest.
what is God's?
Right. He
Yeah.
had no interest in that. But, through my life, I have really become very open spiritually. So I have learned, I've traveled. I've always been myself very sensitive to things that other people weren't sensitive to. And I know a lot of people out there that are probably like that, but I was always wanting to see why I couldn't see what was supposedly there, right? There's heaven, but you can't see it. And, somebody passed away and they're actually not dead, but they're not here anymore. So where are they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just, really kind of simple questions that a kid would ask.
Oh my gosh. So I used to walk down the street with my hand out, and my people would ask me, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I'm holding Jesus's hand. He's everywhere. My parents told me Jesus was everywhere. I'm holding Jesus's hand." So I think those kinds of things are important. And I think especially at this time we're in right
Right.
now, there are, I'm just going to call it what it is. There are evil forces out there that want us disgruntled, that want us to be unhealthy,
Yes.
that want us to be bogged down in our own problems,
Yes.
rather than seeing
Distracted.
what the world should be. And you have to
Mhm.
find that balance, right? You do need to take care of you and yours first.
Right.
We're called to do
Well,
that.
it's our responsibility.
So that we're healthy enough to go out into the world
Yes.
and do what needs to be done. Okay. And it's several kinds of health. There's mental health, there's physical health, there's spiritual health, right? So you've got to make sure you're in all those places. So, I think the death of Charlie Kirk really hit a lot of people. And I don't think it's more or less than anybody else or any of these other tragedies.
Well, he was
But
just
I think
the
there was
news. He
was young.
important.
He had a
Yeah.
young family. He also talked about his faith very openly, and I kind of love that. It's and I'm not Charlie Kirk's demographic. Okay, I'm 66 years old. Who he
Right.
really resonated with was people 30 and under.
Right.
And there is a group of people in this country right now, and I pray about this group of people every day that are in that 30 to 40 range,
Right.
that really feel like the American dream has left them behind. They're not
They're
getting
sad.
where they thought their parents were.
Right.
They've had a lot of things thrown at them. They maybe started out as digital immigrants, and now they're in full on,
Mhm.
got media everywhere.
Right.
And I'm not saying everyone in that group, but I mentor enough young people in that age group, and I hear it too much for it not to be true. Because when you hear from one person or not, you think, oh, that's just, one
Right.
person having a bad day, right?
Right.
And then if you listen, you hear it from several people.
Right.
Then you hear it from people from different walks of life, different demographic backgrounds, whatever. Then you start asking questions to people who might know. And that's really how we move along. And that's how you build your faith too.
Right.
You build your faith by being open.
Right. And it has to be proven out to each individual. And that's why I think it's such a personal experience. Your belief and or disbelief in anything out there other that's say higher power than yourself. It's still your belief. Like everybody has something.
That is true. I was on an airplane once with a guy that was a professor at Emory, and we got onto the subject because, I talk to everybody. And he said he was an atheist.
Right.
But he said that he had 2 children, and he's been married forever.
Right.
And he raised those children to be, good people. And I poked him just a little bit, not in a mean way, because I just met him, but I said,
well, you're asking
what did
questions.
you actually base that morality on? I mean, if you are an atheist, you don't believe in God, but you have some kind of moral compass that you're teaching your children, where do you get that from? And the fact of the matter is, what you get that from is the teachings of the Bible, the teachings of other great documents that are out there related to faith, whether it's whatever it is.
In every single religion, they have some guidelines to live by.
Yes. And if you are raising your children in a certain moral boundaries, there is something behind that. It didn't just come out of thin air. So I think it's important. And I don't know if there's any really atheists. I mean, I'm sure there are, but I think that most people are more agnostic, which means they believe in something, but they're not sure what they believe in. And I think those are the people that we really need to have patience with.
Right. And I believe in my heart that God lives within each of us. So even if there's just because you say you don't believe something doesn't make it true, right? So truth is truth. Principles are principles. They're ever changing, they're unchanging. And I think in each religious context, there have been given some very beautiful creative commands by different people that existed on this earth in different times, right? So it's kind of like a golden strand that I see that's been woven through all the different religions. I also feel that there is a higher, finer version of ourself. We are human beings, right? We are beings living a human life. And I believe that there is a higher, most pure intelligence that is behind the eyes of every single person. Now, are those people allowing that being to be expressed into the world through their facilities? 90% of the time, no, right?
Now that's very Marianne Williamson of you.
It is. It is. But
A
I
little
believe,
Course in Miracles here.
yeah, I believe it to be true. And that's why I've always given a lot of birth to people who think differently than me or to people who are not acting
Well,
properly.
and let's face it.
It's kind of like that's can't be the truth of who you are.
Well,
That has to be something. I don't know what that is, but
well, I mean,
different.
there's two things that I think that, there's this phrase out there, my truth. Okay.
Mm.
You can have a
Truth
belief
is truth.
system. You can have a belief
Right.
system, and that's one thing, but truth is truth,
Truth
right?
is truth.
But I think the other thing that's really interesting is that, you know, you can you're not going, what's the old saying, you can get more flies with honey.
Yes.
If it is our job, and I consider myself to be an evangelical Christian, I don't think it's my personal job to convert every person in the world to
Right.
Christianity, but I think it's my job to present a positive view of myself,
Yes.
and that I feel like I have accomplished something if someone comes to me and says, "What is it that makes you so happy in
What are
your
you
life?
doing?
What are you
Yeah.
doing?" I had this lady that I knew in my first disciple class. Her name was Angela O'Kelly, and she's passed away a long time ago. She was probably the closest thing to Jesus Christ that I've ever met in this
Wow.
earth. And
Oh.
she was a truly good person. You know what I mean? Never had a bad thought,
Right.
never,
Just
was just,
imbued kindness.
yes. And
Yeah.
just you wanted to know more about her, and
Right.
and she was that kind of person. And that's what I learned from her. She was about 85 when I met her.
Right.
And she was, and I kept thinking, there's got to be something wrong with this woman. I mean, because you're cynical,
Yeah.
right? You're a little bit, you
Like, how
think
can
that she
she be
can't be
this
this good,
nice? Yeah.
So, but she taught me something. Gene Beckstein's another one that if you all are listening to me or watching us in Gainesville, Gene Beckstein started Good News at Noon.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
he and his wife moved to the projects after he retired so that he could minister to folks down
Right.
there. And he was a recovering alcoholic, and Jesus used him in different ways. But he was also that kind of good, kind person. And, I fall short of that. I try, I fall short. But you have those people in your life.
Yeah. And those people are the ones who are the living example of how to live the life you draw that to you. And so, to me, that's Jesus. When he walked this earth, he drew people to him
Mhm.
with that very same beauty and magic, that kindness. And, your being, I think, is something that is definitely eternal. Now, part of, where I found my concern was when I had made that major change. I ended up in a situation where I was having nightmares. All these beautiful Jewish folks were because they didn't see Jesus the same way I saw Jesus. So they were burning in hell in my brain and in my nightmares. So I got really mad at God. I got really mad at the whole thing and said, there is no way these nice people who are doing everything right, doing unto others as they would do unto
Mhm.
themselves, following all those guidelines, they just don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. And they were a little different in their views of Jesus than I was raised. And so I just said, you know what? Off with it all. I'm turning it all off. So I went on Rumspringer for a little while. I just kind of got out there and lived my life and got a little crazy and, just, and then at certain points, I had this little inside voice that was like, what are you doing?
Yes.
Right? Like you probably heard the
Mhm.
same, like, what are you doing? Where are you going? And why are you throwing your life away? Why are you making these choices? And that was a very personal moment in time where I started really understanding, it's kind of all this is the background of why I wanted to write that book, Celestial Post Office. Because to me, it's very interesting to hear from people how they got to where they are. Doesn't matter where you are. But I started realizing I could have a very intimate and personal um, relationship with the Lord and with my belief about spirit. I went on my own journey there. And am I a religious person? I'm not super religious, and everybody that knows me in this town knows that I'm very spiritual, and I do honor the belief systems of every single human in this population. As long as their life
Life affirming.
reveals,
Yeah.
yes, life reveals um, something that has guidelines, bumper rails, where you're not out there destroying the lives of others, even in social media or in business. Are you thinking in a way that represents something that's refined and beautiful as far as spirit goes? Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. And I think that we have those questions,
Yeah.
like my daughter used to ask me, well, what if a child dies before, they accept Jesus, And I said, look, children have a special place
Right.
and with Jesus, as do Jewish people have a special
Mm-hmm.
place in with Jesus. But I think those questions, and I think God knows you. We like the symbolism,
Right.
we like the structure,
Right.
we like the processes. Okay, I'm definitely that girl. Okay, I
Right.
like going
And
to
it's
church and having that.
community.
It's community, all of that.
Right.
But I think God knows what's in your heart,
Right.
so that if maybe you didn't go through the process,
Right.
but he knows whether you're there in your heart.
He
And I think,
does.
and I could have a lot of biblical scholars that say you're totally off base on that, Martha, and that's perfectly okay. You can put that in the
But
comments
but do
when
they
you like
really
and
know?
subscribe.
That's my thing. The people that think to me, if someone says to me they know, then I question. Then that makes me a little bit more like, really, do you know? Because the truth is, we are all putting together our belief systems. We're putting together our worlds based on what we filter through our own brains and our thought processes when we get exposed to information, right? So we have to work from our heart more than our head sometimes. And we have to move in a way that makes sense. And there is no way we can really know. There's no one that really knows.
But there is that search from the human soul for
Yes.
God, because if you
Yes.
look at, and it always kind of comes up in tragedies, right? So whether it was when Pearl Harbor happened in
Yeah.
1942, or you had 9/11,
Nine
or you
11.
had the death of Charlie Kirk,
Mm-hmm.
you had October 7th,
Like mass emotion.
people, where did they go? They went to church. They
Right.
went to church, they went to synagogue. They felt that need to be in communion
Right.
with other people. In more recently, in the case of Charlie Kirk, there have been these events that have popped up all over the
Yeah.
world that have been peaceful. They have been faithful and
That is a beautiful
prayerful.
thing.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've seen them in Poland and in Germany and in England and in all over the United States. And I think that's a positive thing.
Oh,
It's
Martha,
a
so
positive
much.
thing that people are reaching for God in this terrible moment. Whatever you call God, I call
Right.
God Lord, Yahweh, the Son of God is Jesus. But whoever you call God, that's who you're looking for. And I think that's a good thing.
I think it leads to nowhere bad.
Yes.
Right. So it's we used to call that bridge here in Gainesville a bridge to nowhere. Well, the search for God is a bridge to somewhere.
Yes.
Right. And no matter where it lands you, if you feel yourself becoming the person you were born to be in a positive light, people see you and they say, you make a difference. You bring light into a room. You help me feel better when times are bad. Like when you live your life expressing the love of humankind. Now that's not going to happen every day. I mean, there's things we're just going to say no. Like the murdering, the killing, no. That's
Well,
not
and
right.
there's a
But
responsibility we have as faithful people that
right.
if you have things like in my faith tradition, you had people like the Westboro Baptist Church that were protesting um, funerals and saying horrible things and definitely did not represent mainstream Christianity,
Right.
and Christians stood up and said, no,
That's okay.
they do not speak for us.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And whether you talk about that or you talk about, the case where on religious basis, a abortion doctor was murdered in his church. No, we don't stand for that.
Nope.
If you are a Muslim, you need to stand up against radical Islamists that
Yes.
are doing things that are outside because they use your faith. They use
It's been
God,
done forever.
yes, to be
You
able
know?
to justify their situation.
Yeah. I mean, there's been more deaths at the hands of, you know, like the inquisitions and all these things. There's been a lot of unnecessary deaths over the course of this world's history in the name of religion,
Yes.
right? And we all know that fear controls. So the more fearful we are as a population, the more controllable we are. So, my hope is that through some of the loss that we've faced recently, that people stop being afraid and start paying attention and start really listening to their hearts and going where it makes them feel better, right?
So I mentioned at the beginning of this that I grew up in a Lutheran tradition. And one of the great things I think about Lutheranism was Martin Luther. Martin Luther translated the Bible into a language that was spoken by the people who was reading it. In that
Right.
case, it was German, but eventually it led to being translated into all the languages. Prior to that, the leaders of the church kept it in Latin, where only really
Only the
educated
big
people
Yes,
could read
only
it.
the leadership could
There's a
read.
joke in the Catholic Church. We don't read the Bible because we don't have to. They tell us what it says. There's a joke in the about that. So,
I mean,
but
the control there is pretty obvious.
and you think about that was what 500 years ago. It was around 500 years ago, and you think about we're talking about eternity here. I know you think 500 years is a long time, but when you're talking about cultural change and being open
Oh
things
my
up to
gosh.
people,
Yeah.
it's not that long. And so the great thing that came out of that is in the palm of my hand, I have a app that I use every day that's called YouVersion, and it's got a verse and a little thing to read every single day. But in the stroke of I tell you to get away from those phones, but sometimes they're good. In a little click, I can look at every translation of that verse
That's amazing.
and compare and contrast. So what I say to you is that while I am a Christian and I believe in a more traditional view of that,
Right.
I think that what we have to do, especially in dark times like we're in right now, we have to be open to people with the
Agree.
caveat of being able to say to someone, I think you're on the wrong path,
Right.
but
You
in
could
a
say that.
loving way.
Yeah, and the person that might be, I was taught there was something that I was taught when I was in business and when I was just looking to get as many skills to be the best person to lead people that I could be. And one of the things that I was taught was don't go in where there's no response, right? And when we were talking earlier, when you were talking about, people coming to you and saying, "What are you doing?" I had taken an idea about children playing with toys, and you have two-year-olds sitting there playing with their trucks, right? And maybe the truck you have is the big, beautiful truck, and it's the better of the two trucks if you really look at the practicality of it. But if you go and you tear that truck out of the other two-year-old's hand, what is he going to do? He's going to have a meltdown. He's going to stomp his feet. He's going to get upset, and he's not going to want to have any part of playing with you. But if you sit there nicely and you just play with your truck or you live your life in the way that you see is the right way to go in your world, very likely that child with the smaller, less cool truck will put that truck down and want to pick up your toy, right? And play with it. And then you have made a difference because that person has come to you and given you an opening. And so I found over the course of my life that where there was no response, I wouldn't stop loving because I would never withhold love
Mm-hmm.
from someone just because they didn't respond to me or weren't behaving in a way I wanted them to. Love is love, and that's who we represent. God is love, and I believe that to be true. But I would not keep trying to give that person, it's like pearls before swine, right? I wouldn't keep trying to go somewhere where there's no door.
Well, and just
So,
like a parent,
mhm.
showing your love sometimes means saying the difficult things.
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so I think that that's important. So what I would just say as we're closing up is that, um, you know, I would love to hear from you all about what your faith
Yeah.
traditions are. I hope that if you're struggling, that you would find a church or a synagogue or another group to attend,
Some
to be
community
able
of
to find some
sorts.
community of
Mhm.
faith. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you joined us here today because we've been struggling in a lot of ways, and we definitely want to be able to have this discussion with you over time. So I hope you'll like and subscribe to the podcast. I hope you'll take a moment out of every day and think about your blessings. And I'm really excited at how this is going to impact your health.
And, no matter what you believe or how you feel, as long as you are walking the life that represents something positive, something good, you do not have to subscribe to Martha's or my belief systems. There's a million things you can do in the world that are very good and very supportive and very helpful. So we encourage you to do that. And we want you to keep joining us and having these conversations. Put in the comments if you have disagreements or if you agree with either one of us, we'll be fine because these conversations will lead to a better, healthier world. And we truly believe, Martha and I, that your wellness absolutely deserves a little oversharing.